There was another challenger tearing his way through the lists, one Criston Cole of the Stormlands, the son of a steward, if word was to believe.
Naruto, son of our beloved Prince Daemon, will select his first opponent in a test of arms.
Ah, that was his cue. Showtime. Bright eyes raked over the knights assembled. He could have chosen Otto's son, but that seemed in poor taste at the moment. Alicent would never forgive him if he brutalized her brother. Not the Starks either, they were a dour lot, but he didn't have anything against them. The Lannisters might be fun to smack around, but not too much.
Eventually his gaze settled on Sir Criston Cole himself. He'd enhorsed both of the Baratheon lads already in the joust. Doubtless he'd give Daemon trouble. Best to nip that in the bud early. You. He drew his sword and pointed at the hedge knight. You'll do. Credit where it was due, the knight bowed and hefted his weapon. A flail by the look of it. He couldn't remember the last time he'd fought against a flail.
Begin.
Metal hurtled in at his face. He grinned. Criston Cole was skilled. Very skilled. He wielded that flail of his like he'd been born with it. More than that, he was cautious. No arrogance, no wasted moves, no preening or posturing like some proud peacock. It almost reminded him of, oh.
Was that it?
He pivoted, and to his great delight, Sir Criston matched him move for move, ringing the side of his helmet like a gong. Gasps went up from the crowd as his ears rang. He grit his teeth in a laugh and lashed out, only to find himself rebuffed. Time and time again that stoic shield interposed itself between him and certain defeat. Who was he really under that helmet? He wanted to know. No, he needed to now. Faster and faster the tempo went until all he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears, the hammering of his own heart. How long had it been since he'd had a proper fight?
Long. Too long. Far too long.
He let Cole's flail curl around his blade and yanked backward, tearing it out of his grasp. Pivoting on one heel, he whirled and hurtled it well out of reach. No more of that annoying weapon. The son of the steward froze, unarmed at the last. Naruto tore his spare blade free from his belt and flung it at his feet. Pick it up.
The knight hesitated.
Pick it up. He all but growled the last word.
Cole knelt slowly, never once taking his eyes off him.
Just how much longer was he going to take? Come on, pick it up.
Criston could eye him all he liked. He had no intention of ruining this moment. Not when he had finally found some semblance of a challenge. He was going to savor this moment, and the promise it offered.
At length Sir Criston stood, borrowed blade in hand. Well met. He saluted him with his sword. You are a man of honor, just as I'd heard. ... I'm really not. Mirroring his stance, he stepped in. Just a man. Now for the moment of truth. Their blades clashed, flashed, and sprang apart. Naruto saw his opening and swung high, knocking his helmet askew and raking a bloody line across his cheek.
Dark hair framed a tanned face from which startled eyes shone. Dornish. The man was Dornish, and an utter stranger to him. It only further inflamed his confusion. He himself looked different as a Targaryen. This could be anyone. He'd known more than a few swordsmen in his day. Was he just that good? Or perhaps? The announcer boomed his approval. First blood to the prince.
Cole closed with him. They collided in a storm of swords and all the world fell away to dull gray. Clash, clang, block, riposte, thrust, parry. Sir Criston gave as good as he got. He'd give him that. Time and time again their blades collided in a dance of death, and time and again the Dornishman surprised him with his skill. His shield was useless here. He cast it aside and braved his blade with both hands, the better to put more strength into his swings. Finally he saw his opening. Cole's sword swept and landed a heavy strike on an arm. Steel skittered off steel as the vambrace shattered. Even as it did his eyes sparked with triumph. Gotcha. Grinning from ear to ear, he ignored the pain that spiked down his arm and followed through to sweep his legs. Sir Kristen Cole crashed down on his back in a heap. Dazed eyes blinked up at him. What was that? That was me, Naruto growled, looming over him, knocking your ass to the dirt. When the older man drew a knife, he stamped down on his wrist, planted a boot on his chest and touched the sword to his throat. Now yield. Don't make me destroy you. Then I yield. The knight did so with a laugh. Well fought, my lord. Naruto squinted down at him. Who are you, really? A baffled blink. Just a hedge knight, my lord. Was he? He glared at Sir Kristen, searching for something. A sign of chakra, recognition in his eyes. Something. Anything. He found nothing. Not a spark, not an ember, nothing at all. You couldn't hide chakra. You were born with it, just as he'd been reborn with his, or born without it. And from Sir Kristen Cole he sensed nothing. Not a drop of it. No, he was normal. Completely, utterly, normal.
Distantly, he heard the crowd cheer his name as he let Sir Kristen up. The latter grabbed his arm and held it high, pumping his fist into the air. It did him little good. A swell of bitter disappointment drowned Naruto's hopes, and choked his good mood. For a moment there he'd almost hoped, nearly dared to believe someone might have followed him into this reincarnation. But now, even now he was alone. The thought tore a bitter laugh from him. He needed a drink, something strong, maybe a whore or two to take the edge off.
He left the field, tears stinging in his eyes.
Always alone. Always. 0, 0.
There would be no peace while he slept. Only a few short hours later, the realm shattered.
And so it finally began. The first steps, leading to the dance. 0, 0. Disaster struck the next morning.
Naruto woke to a fierce pounding on his door, one to match the din beating in his head. Go away, he groaned into his pillow. "I'm tired." He vaguely recalled stumbling around the Red Keep, bottle in hand until he ran into someone. He'd slumped against them, they'd wrapped an arm around his waist and helped him back to Ho's room. Memory went fuzzy after that. An arm flailed around and failed to find anyone nearby. Mercifully, his bed was empty. Well, thanked heaven for small mercies. The pounding ceased as the HHE door swung open. Crashed, really? Alicent. He blinked blearily.
Her face went redder than her hair as she saw his bare chest. Her lips moved, almost numbly. She's dead.
Who is? He pushed himself upright. Her face went redder still. Are you drunk? Hungover. Naruto calmed his face. Don't wanna talk about it. Who died? Alicent took a deep breath. Then she told him. The queen. And the world changed.
0, 0.
Targaryen funerals were a grim affair. Naruto had been to his fair share before in the past, but never quite one like this. Two bodies lay upon the pyre before them. One large, the other small. Two lives lost in so short a time, two smiling faces he'd never see again. Dozens of people had gathered near the capital to send them off here, on a hill some miles outside the Red Keep, just shy of the sea. He found some lovely irony in that.
Aunt Emma had always loved the sea.
He hadn't known her all that well. He'd made an effort in the past, but now he found himself wishing he'd tried that much harder. Could he have done something? Could he have saved her? He didn't know. The uncertainty of it gnawed at him like an old dog with a bone. If he'd been awake, aware, not drunk off his ass wallowing in self-pity. Would they still be alive? There was no way of knowing. And not knowing. Cyrax loomed in the distance, crouched and awaiting orders. Caraxes wheeled down to join her. For once, neither dragon snapped at one another. Even they understood the solemnity of all this. The king's family had been destroyed. Nothing would be the same. No amount of fire and blood could bring back the dead. Even now he could feel Alicent staring at his back, wanting to comfort him. No just him, but Rhaenyra, Daemon, even poor Viserys himself. Too kind, that girl. Too kind by half. He heard Daemon whisper something to Rhaenyra over his shoulder. They're waiting for you. Naruto looked to his cousin. She looked even worse than he felt. Her eyes red, wet with unshed tears she refused to let fall. Stubborn little cousin. Even now at her lowest point she was a fierce dragon, wounded perhaps by loss but refusing to. Viserys, meanwhile, looked like a broken man. No, that was too kind. Hollow eyes gazed upon the pyre as though he were contemplating flinging himself upon to burn with his wife and infant son. He didn't know what had transpired in that birthing chamber to break him so. He didn't want to know, if only because he knew he wouldn't like it.
I wonder, Rhaenyra spoke, softly, suddenly. Her voice a low, agonized rasp. During those few hours my brother lived, if my father finally found happiness.
Daemon nudged her. Your father needs you now more than he ever has. She looked away. I will never be a son. No, you won't. Naruto sighed over the pained noise she made, cutting her off before she could fly into a rage. You must be better than one. He reached over to squeeze her hand. And you will be. Rhaenyra latched on tight and squeezed back. She squeezed so hard he felt her nails bite into his skin. I don't want to say goodbye. Her words were a whisper. Then don't. Remember your mother for who she was, for how she lived, not how she died.
She rallied a little. Tried to speak, faltered at first. Rallied when he nudged her.
He looked to her. She looked to him. They looked back to the pyre. And then, together, quote. Dracarys. Syrax and Caraxes exhaled. The bodies burned. You're weak, Viserys. That council of leeches knows it. They all play on you for their own ends. I have decided to name a new heir.
I'm your heir.
Not anymore. You are to gather your men, leave for the stepstones at once. And you are to do so without quarrel. By order of your king.
The moment.
A new heir.
You're leaving. It's just as I said. Daemon shrugged on his pack, checked Dark Sister in her sheath, and turned to face him at the last, face writ in a scowl. My dear brother has seen fit to disinherit me. I'm off to the stepstones to win his war for him. Naruto opened his mouth to answer, closed it again when temper threatened to get the best of him. Mustn't lash out, no matter how much he wanted to want it. Any sign of violence would be met with more violence. He cast a baleful look at the paired Kingsguard blocking the door, effectively sealing them in tea. He dimly recalled their names. Sir Eric and Eric of House Cargill, brothers. No doubt they were here to make certain he behaved himself, or see if he had any part of his father's madness last night.
And what madness it was. The heir for a day. What was Daemon thinking, saying that? Not much, apparently. His father had come barging in here just before dawn to collect his things and bid his goodbyes. He sailed with Lord Curlees on the morning tide. I can't believe he would do this.
He did. Daemon stalked about the room like a man possessed, tugging on his cloak. It's already done. Because you said something foolish.
I was drunk. His father pivoted on him with a wild look in his eyes. And I would not have said such a thing in his presence. No, we both knew who's responsible for this.
Yes, we do. Daemon squinted at him. Don't look at me like that. I had no part in this. You did. He returned his glare, refusing to falter. You should have been by Uncle's side or even Rhaenyra's. Otto wouldn't have any ammunition to use against you if you had. Instead, you were off getting yourself soused. Of course, he used that against you. You gave him the perfect opportunity. Only a fool would ignore it. Daemon reared back, hissing like the dragon he was at heart. And what would you have done? Hunkered down, he snapped in return. Held my tongue and comforted them until the storm passed, which is exactly what I did. His lord father considered him for a long, agonizing moment. And where were you last night? With Rhaenyra. The words tore out of him in a roar, and he thrust both arms forward, shoving his father away. From there he stomped forward, smashing a booted foot down on his father's to hold him in place lest he lunge at him. I held her all night, she cried herself to sleep in my arms. Do you have any idea what that's like? A tan finger shot forth, digging itself into the elder Targaryen's leather cuirass. No, of course you don't. How could you? You only care about yourself.
Daemon flung up his arms. And now you throw his words back at me. Naruto bit his tongue to stifle his temper. I'm sorry. He didn't want them to part like this, not on such a sour note. How long will you and Caraxes be gone? A bitter bark of laughter filled the air. A year, perhaps, maybe 2. He shrugged one shoulder stiffly, his face a mask of tight anger. Perhaps once I burn Crabfeeder out of the stepstones, the king will see fit to restore my rights. Naruto didn't think he would. Not after a slight like this. An ugly thought struck him. If you're not the heir, then who is?
Rhaenyra, I expect. Daemon shrugged a shoulder. Won't she be surprised?
She certainly would. He almost pitied her. ... I'll go with you, he decided at length. A quick pivot brought him to his own desk, which he promptly began ransacking. We'll deal with the Crabfeeder together. It won't even take a year.
Daemon's anger died a slow death on his face, withering away into a strained smile. Nothing would please me more, but you can't come with me. Excuse me. His father looked past him to the still silent Kingsguard brothers. You are to stay here, by order of the king. Realization broke like the dawn, burning all uncertainty away. As a hostage to ensure your compliance. Daemon didn't say a word. He didn't have to.
Naruto made a choked noise. Quote ... Exclamation mark quote.